and I'd like to introduce you to Astrid Deuber-Mankowsky, who will present and share her thoughts on the topics of reproduction and surrogacy with us. And a little introduction, a few words about you, Astrid. Astrid is a professor of media studies and gender studies at the Ruhr University in Bochum. You are the co-founder and were the co-editor of the journal Die Philosophin, Forum für feministische Theorie und Philosophie from 1990 to 2004. And you were visiting scholar at the university in Berkeley, guest professor at the Centre d'études du vivant at the Université Paris 7, senior fellow at IKKM Weimar, and Max Kade professor at the Columbia University. And you're also an associate member of the Institute for Cultural Inquiry in Berlin. Thank you so much for being here, and I'd like to make a little connection to one of the previous presentations, to the lecture by Johannes Paul Räther, because Johannes, I think you also elaborated on the topic of surrogacy, so Leihmutterschaft in German, and how maybe it could be possible to evolve artistic fabulation around this very sensitive and also problematic topic. And Astrid, you're going to share with us today some thoughts on a film that was, I think, released a couple of years ago in 2009. And actually, Naina Patel, who was also mentioned in the presentation by Johannes, is also one of the protagonists of that film. In fact, the film Google Baby, which you are going to talk about, describes how pregnancy and human reproduction is today mediated, capitalized, and globalized through biotechnology and digital networks, and what kind of new business models, relations, and exploitation derive from it, and how it is also detached from sexual desire. And I think it is worth to mention that the film also caused a lot of controversy when it was released because of the supposedly neutral depiction of what this process of surrogacy actually means as a kind of globalized aspect of biopolitics, if I may frame it this way. So give a warm welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I hand it over to you. Thanks, Astrid.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Fabian Saavedra-Lara. I just will give you a very short input because, as far as I understood, we will then have a conversation and continue perhaps also one of the questions which could have been, arise now after the talk of Marie-Louise Angerer. So I will just speak about 10 minutes, not more. Blue Skies and Paris in Trouble is a particularly fitting title for the topic or the problem with which I would like to introduce our conversation about the history of the concept of life. Surrogacy as a complex entanglement of desire, reproduction, pregnancy, technology, nature, gender, race, class, and sexuality, temporalities, and violence. In a best-case scenario, pregnancy is desired and free from complications, and the child is welcome. But we know that these happy cases, although desirable, are not and have never been the rule. Just think of the conflict-laden biblical story of Hagar's surrogacy to fulfill Sarah's and Abraham's desire to have children. The childless Sarah sent her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abraham to bear her a child. But as soon as Hagar was pregnant, the balance of power was out of balance. Sarah became jealous of her maid. She treated her badly. Hagar fled and returned again at God's command. First, she had to give up her son Ismael, yet was sent back into the desert with him 14 years later, when Isaac was born with God's help. Or let's think of the many women who got pregnant and still get pregnant today without wanting to. The desire to have children and pregnancy often go their own ways. They do not belong together per se, even if we all wish for this, because even if we do not plan on having children, then we all wish to have been planned children. In the biblical stories of Sarah, Hagar, and Mary, it is God who intervenes in the fabric between the desire to have children and reproduction. Sarah and Mary know that their pregnancies are not natural. The 90-year-old Sarah laughs as she hears God announce to Abraham that he will conceive a son with Sarah, knowing that she is too old to have children. The question of what is natural touches the very point that distinguishes surrogacy today from biblical stories. Today, an intervention in the relation between reproduction and the desire to have children no longer violates nature, at least not if one follows the biosciences and genetic engineering in defining nature. During the second half of the 20th century, molecular biology and genetic engineering have broken down the body into its smallest components, which are detached from the individual body, circulate freely, and can be reassembled. Reproductive medicine interprets reproduction subsequently as modular system. Its elements include sperms and oocytes that are fertilized in vitro and then frozen and stored outside of the body, or inserted into an uterus in which the embryos grow into babies. In this modular logic, gestational surrogacy no longer appears as something unnatural, but as a natural consequence of this concept of reproduction through genetic engineering and reproductive medicine. It is the inherent logic and the specific rationality of the transformation of reproduction into a modular construction kit that today changes the structure of the desire to have children and reproduction, or even more, shakes it. The social and individual effects of this transformation are still not quite understood. This leads me now to the film which Fabian, you already introduced, by Sippi Brand-Frank, concisely titled Google Baby, which was shot in Israel and other countries in 2009. The direction of Brand-Frank's documentary already becomes clear by taking a look at the film poster. We see a fetus floating in space in a measured globe. I hope you can see the fetus too. Yes. The image of the globe also represents the belly of a pregnant woman. The connotation of the globe and the pregnant belly surrounding the fetus distinguishes this image from Leonard Nielsen's iconic photographs from the 1960s, in which the fetuses, like astronauts, float through space only wrapped in their amniotic sac, adorning the covers of the leading magazines in the decade of the moon landing. However, the return of the pregnant female body on Google Baby's film poster does not mean that the situation of women today is taken more into account than it was at the time of the moon landing. The title Google Baby appears on the film poster as a URL address. A framed line below the picture shows the identification number of a surrogate mother. Do you see it? Yeah. The identification number of an egg and that of a sperm. The button-like shopping cart in a blue field with the prompt "Add to cart" points the way to the fulfillment of the wish to have children in the age of the internet and its new business models. As it says in a text introducing the film, all you need is a credit card. The whole text presented by a voiceover is as follows. In the 60s, the introduction of the birth control pill took the risk of making babies out of sex. Today, new technologies have taken sex out of the act of making babies. And globalization is making it affordable. Now all one needs is a credit card. Instructions can be found on YouTube. Unlike conventional documentaries about global surrogacy, such as, for example, Bomb of the World by National Geographic from 2004, or the BBC documentary House of Surrogates from 2013, Google Baby does not follow the exemplary story of a Western and white heterosexual couple suffering from childlessness, nor does it portray the fate of Indian surrogate mothers. Instead of taking us on an emotional journey with a compassionate and identifying gaze, the director confronts us with a distant and observing gaze. It is not personal fates that are documented, but the establishment of Tammuz, a company in Tel Aviv, for the placement of international surrogate mothers for all people who want a child, and especially for homosexual couples. With its double focus on families that do not correspond to the heterosexual pattern on the one hand, and to the entanglement of media, the internet economy, reproductive technologies, and the desire to have children on the other, the film opens our eyes to the ambivalences, contradictions, and questions hidden behind opposing positions of pro or contra surrogacy and reproductive technologies. And I mean, I could stop here, but I could just go on a little bit more, just as you're up to.
I think it would be interesting if you could go on for a bit. I also have some questions, but I think it would be, at this point, it would be interesting to continue with the,
Yeah, okay. The film was shot in Israel, India, and the US, makes visible what remains hidden in documentaries that focus on identification with personal fates. It shows how the reproduction technologies released from the research laboratories, this is, I think, very important, become the basis for new internet-based business models. They follow the algorithms optimization logic of Web 2.0, which in turn enters into an alliance with strong feelings and wishes to stabilize the contractual conditions. Skype, smartphones, websites with profiles of act donors to click through credit cards, rolling cases for transporting cooling tanks with frozen embryos, the corporate communication of Dr. Nayana Patel, whose famous fertility clinic in India has an integrated house for surrogate mothers, all become media that participate in the globalization of pregnancies. They editorialize the relation between the desire for children and reproduction and create a new territory, that's, I think, important too, in which reproduction is definitively separated from sexual desire and in which the desire for a child economy, you understand what I mean? The desire for a child economy is translation of Wunschkind Ökonomie. Is instead embedded in intertwined with the digital economy. Now, as you already mentioned, Fabian, C.P. Frank's film has been criticized for not positioning itself clearly. The criticism was formulated by feminists who see surrogacy as a continuation of the colonization of the female body, bodies in trouble, thus as a continuation of prostitution and pornography. As in the case of prostitution and pornography, there are two controversial positions in the discourse on surrogacy. On the one hand, surrogacy is seen as the continued exploitation of the female body, while surrogate mothers appear as helpless victims. As a consequence, a ban on surrogacy is demanded. On the other hand, surrogacy is interpreted as work that must be paid accordingly and legally secured in order to strengthen the rights of surrogate mothers in all parts of the world and to support them in improving their living conditions. The position is shared by feminist ethnographers who explore the impact of international and commercial surrogacy. They insist that surrogate mothers must be taken seriously in their subjectivity and their decisions and desires, but they also analyze the complex network of relationships of surrogacy in the context of social, racist, economic, and global power relations and inequalities. And this brings me now to the last point and to the fact that the mutual stabilization of the desire for child economy, global fertilization industry, and international surrogacy is based on the reproduction, and that is quite important, of heteronormative and gender hierarchical structures. Companies for the placement of international surrogacy mothers underline that their surrogate mothers are married and have given birth to at least one child. They only hire wives and mothers of at least 2 children as surrogate mothers, with husbands agreeing and signing the contract, because this gives them, the knowledge that those mothers, or they think that this gives them the security and the knowledge that those mothers will not lay claim on the children they give birth. The actor in the film is also married, has 2 children, and undergoes hormone treatment and surgery because, like the women in India, she wants to finance a house for the family and a better future for the children. This is a kind of this territorializing of the affect economy, we could also say. In this way, the naturalization of the desire to have children compensates for the rupture initiated by the bioscientific transformation of reproduction into a modular system and the release of reproductive technologies from research laboratories with all the known cultural notions of the origin of children. The naturalization of the desire to have children and the entanglement of wish economy, affective ties, and economy 2.0 also functions as a stabilizing moment that makes the future, and this is quite important, the future predictable and plannable for the new digital business models with reproduction. This happens as documented in Google Baby through the reproduction of heteronormative gender hierarchies and the reproduction and stabilization of inequalities between North and South. The growing fertilization industry in India is also easily arranged with the return of fundamentalist positions and the caste system. Since 2013, homosexual couples in India have no longer been allowed to commission babies. With Deleuze and Guattari, the naturalization of the desire to have children can be understood as a process of imitated artificial re-territorialization, in which the structure of desire to have children and reproduction is built on the, I quote now, here Deleuze and Guattari, on the ruins of territorial and despotic, mythical and tragic representations, detached from sexual desire and the idea of an integral body. As Deleuze and Guattari noted in 1972, and which is particularly consistent in the case of the naturalization of the desire to have children, the form of private property represents the core of these violent and misogynist re-territorializations of capitalism. If the new possibilities for a better present are to have a chance with the new reproduction techniques that appear in some scenes of Google Baby, then only under the condition that the close interweaving of digital techniques, neoliberal capitalist market economy, and the child desire economy is resolved. And I'm really happy to add that very recently in 2019, a new book came out written by Sophie Lewis, a young scholar, which worked together with Donna Haraway too, entitled Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family. And there in this book she also, argues for a kind of an affirmation of the possibility of surrogacy, but only under the condition that surrogacy and these new possibilities and new kind of understanding of nature is not anymore connected to the way in which our digital media are really with Web 2.0 just, embedded in a capitalist business model kind of concept, which continues to re-territorialize and territorialize in a new way, so to say, the fetishization of everything. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Astrid Deuber-Mankowsky. Are there any questions or comments or remarks? We have some time now, but we can also wait a bit. And I have one question for you. Maybe if you would like to answer. You speak a lot in your essay and also in your remarks right now about this concept of the human body is broken down, right? Molecularization. And this is also kind of a concept that appears in the practice by Nobotic, who are here present in the exhibition. They also speak about molecularization and like this moment when kind of the body is fragmented and all the elements are kind of commodified, right, and circulated. And what do you think, how does this, because you speak also about the concept of life, right? What is this life? What do you think, how does this molecularization change your understanding or the understanding of life?
So I think I would follow Georges Canguilhem, a philosopher and historian of science, who actually was one of the first who began to research on the history of so-called life sciences. So we already had Bachelard, for example, who wrote the history of physics. But until I think the very beginning of the 19th century, if you spoke of science, you would not have thought of biology or life sciences, but you would have thought of physics. So Georges Canguilhem, he was the one who founded the epistemology of life sciences. And I found that really interesting because Donna Haraway, whom we all like to refer to her work, she also is used to, or was firstly a biologist. And both of them, both of them in a different way, but I think that this is the kernel, of the myth of she cyborg, point to the fact that in the process of the kind of progress of life sciences, in this interdisciplinary research practices, life sciences began to treat their objects like objects which are not animated. So they began to use information theory and cybernetic theories in order to describe living systems. And this is what Haraway really criticized, and then they tried to simulate life. And this is what we are facing today in everywhere. And so it was Canguilhem who would say that in a situation in which life sciences are, just losing the concept of life, and this began already, in the beginning of the 19th century with Claude Bernard, who would say that it is not the task of a biologist or physiologist, and he was the one who founded physiology as a kind of science, to define what life is, because what they are doing is to treat their objects as a ensemble of functions and of operations. So, what does that mean? for Guillaume, who was really a very important, I think, philosopher and historian of science, he would say that, or this is at least what I would say too, is that now, in the moment in which life sciences do not anymore, define or just have or do not think of themselves as having the task to define life, but just explain how, those modular kind of objects operate together. It is the task of the, so-called Geisteswissenschaft or the humanities to describe what life is. And I think that these many different narratives and speculations, especially formulated and told by Donna Haraway and others, are just, they are just, fulfilling this kind of idea that it's up to the culture studies, it's up to philosophy to describe and to kind of find new ways of how life can be described in a normative way too, because it has to do with norms, of how we can deal with a situation in which life sciences do not anymore define what life is. And you would just, experience that very explicitly if you speak, for example, with biologists who were asked of when, for example, life would begin. This very old kind of question related to reproductive ethics, they would say that is not their, task to decide when life begins. That is a task of society. We have to deal with that, and that's why I think that the whole question of human and kind of robot and artificial intelligence discussions, I would, just suggest to shift a little bit the way in which we are speaking about those questions. This is what I wanted to say to answer to your question.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or remarks or questions? Okay, yeah.
You mentioned one of the students of Donna Haraway who claimed in the end that that book Feminism Against Surrogacy.
Yes, Sophie Lewis.
Sophie Lewis. And I was reminded on another quote of Haraway, make kin, not babies.
Yeah.
And I was asking myself whether, this might be the new notion that life, is exceeding the human form, and that we are now in a way need to open up to other than human forms of life, of reproductiveness and of excess.
Yes, see, I think that it is not life which is exceeding those kind of artifacts, but I think that it's up to us to find a good way of telling us the story of what life could be in order just to have the possibility to live together on this planet. Because life does not listen to us, I think it's a big metaphysic speculation, but at the same time, and this is what I would share with Guillaume too and Foucault too, who was very, close and very, they really worked together and thought together, is that, and Marie-Louise, you mentioned that the question of errance, of the possibility of, not knowing, of coincidence, is very closely connected to the question of how we think of life. For example, for Foucault and for Guillaume too, the the way in which we refer to the question of life and to the question at the same time of the sciences, which, you know, describe for us what living or not living objects are, is very much connected or depend, or I have forgotten how I began the sentence, sorry. But what I want to say is that the fact of historicity, of the possibility of history, depends on how we think of life. Because only if we give, you know, the historicity of life a chance, we can also think of the historicity of knowledge, and only then we can just have a future which is not already embedded in algorithms and predictive sowieso.
Thank you so much, Astrid Deuber-Mankowsky.
Yes.
Are there any more comments or questions? Okay. Thanks again, and thanks for listening.